Well, good afternoon. It's 4:32 here in Cincinnati. Just getting started a little bit late. We have to get all the technology working properly. This afternoon and early evening, we're going to discuss Chapter 7, 8, and 9. Chapter 7, Management and Leadership. Chapter 8, Structuring Organizations for Today's Challenges. And then finally, Production and Operations Management in Chapter 9. Now let's look at our learning objectives. Describe the changes occurring today in management function. Describe the four functions of management. Very important. We need to make sure we do that, and those go across the board for everyone. Relate the planning process and decision making to accomplish organization goals. Describe the organization function of management. Good afternoon, Mr. Bajari. Explain the differences between leaders and managers and describe the various leadership styles. And then finally, summarize the 5 steps of the control function of management. Okay, we start with the definition here. And that is definition of management. And without going into this to a great extent, what we see here is that it is the process, if you will. Now, of course, people do this, but it's the process that's used to accomplish what we want to accomplish, to get done what we want to get done through the 4 functions of management: planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Now notice that controlling talks about controlling employees and organization resources, other resources besides the humans. And I always have a little bit of problem when I talk about this, because I don't think you can really control other human beings. I think you lead them. I think you direct them. I think that you give them the resources that he or she needs to do to complete their tasks, and then you need to get out of the way. If you're going to micromanage an employee, then you really have to question your leadership ability and even your management ability. Now, management and leadership are different. I hope we can put that contrast between the two of them well enough out here tonight for you to see. Some texts that I have that are beyond, or some courses that I've taught in the past that are beyond an introductory course, do a little bit better job of explaining that. So I want to make sure that we do that today, so everybody understands. This particular question here, it's not a question. This particular slide talks about today's managers, that they're younger, they're more progressive, certainly not in the old school. At least I hope they're not in the old school. Pay more attention to teams and team building. And what this last says here, it doesn't really talk about what they are, but what they need to be. And that is good communicators. Now, that good communication is really important when we come to the medium that we're using here tonight, and that is a computer. You know, we're delivering this through a personal computer that's on my desk here. We do a lot of interaction, communication with employees today with computers, and of course with text messages through Twitter or Facebook or Instagrams or any of those other type things that we have. And what I want to say here is that it's important for the manager leader, whatever you want to call this particular person, to get his or her message across. We don't talk a lot about communication in this course. I don't have a specific chapter on communication. Communication is very important. It's really important, especially when we're using these tools that we have today that are limited in some cases to 140 characters, that we get the message we want to deliver across, and the person on pardon me, on the other end who is decoding our message decodes it in the way we want it to be decoded. So we're all on the same sheet of music. So it's very important for them to do that. This particular slide talks about talks about respect and how to get it. Notice what it's talking about here. It's talking about management, sound business strategy, ethical practices, etc. And these are things that managers have to be aware of and make sure that whatever that is, that it resonates with the employee to get the respect that's needed and to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. This particular slide just simply shows the alma maters of various CEOs, and I'm not going to spend any time on it. I think we do have a slide later on that talks about where these particular CEOs went or didn't go. And we'll find that a lot of the CEOs that have been successful have gone to what's known as euphemistically referred to as the School of Hard Knocks. In some cases, those folks really didn't go to the School of Hard Knocks as much as they entered a college or university and then dropped out for various and sundry reasons. These are the 4 functions of management. We've alluded to them before: planning, leading, organizing, and controlling. I won't tell you that any one precedes another or that is more important than another except planning. Planning has to come first. If you don't plan, you're not going to be able to lead, to organize, and to control. Now, by the way, when I give these 4 functions, and have been giving them for many years, I normally state planning, organizing, leading, and controlling, because when I first taught this course, and first taught a management course back in the late 1990s, organizing was always second. And we see now that leading is second and then organizing. And I would submit to you that perhaps those ought to be flipped, but it is irrelevant. These are the 4 functions. People have to be comfortable in each of the 4 functions and making sure they get what is needed in each of the 4 functions out. I'm not going to read the sub in each of these. You can see this in your text. It's figure 7.1 on page 187. But I do say that planning comes first, because if you don't have planning, the rest of the things will not fall in place. This talks about vision. And notice what it says here, that the vision is not a goal. It's an overarching statement, if you will, that tells all of us and those outside our confines why we're in the business we're in, what it is we're trying to do, and where it is we want to go. Now, the vision statement is different than the mission statement. The mission statement includes things that are noticed here. By the way, these are articulated for you in the text on page 189. Our self-concept, philosophy, long-term survival needs. what it is our customers need and what we're going to provide the customers. Our statement of social responsibility is included in that. And then what it is that we make or sell or what service we provide. After we have the mission statement, we have goals and objectives. Goals are broad terms of things that we want to achieve somewhere down the line. Whereas objectives tell us how we're going to achieve the goals, and objectives may in fact be short term. So our goals, it's possible that our goals may not change over a period of time, but the objectives will, and we have different types of objectives, and we'll try to speak to those a little bit here as we get to the next slide. Now, one of the things that we talk about here is a SWOT analysis. That SWOT analysis is graphically displayed, figure 7.2 on page 190. And a SWOT analysis outlines an organization's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You will notice in the text that weaknesses are usually referred to as something that's internal that we can, in and of ourselves, correct. And the object is to turn weaknesses into strengths, excuse me. Opportunities and threats normally come from outside. And obviously the same thing is true here. We want to turn threats into opportunities. Then we talk about how we reach the goals. And there's 4 types of planning that are here. And I want you to look at these as objectives: strategic, tactical, operational, and contingency. Now, the SWOT matrix, we have I want to go on past that because we've kind of talked about that a little bit, and I don't like to go back, even though that's what the slides tell us to do. So we have strategic, tactical, contingency, and operational. Strategic, this planning is set by the corporate officers, and also may be set by or influenced by, if it's a corporation, the board of directors. Tactical planning gets into our short-range objectives, and these are set by the middle managers and perhaps supervisors after they receive the strategic plan. And we go to operational plans, that's setting schedules, etc. And then contingency planning is something that we have in case everything that we put on paper and talked about isn't accomplished or can't be accomplished for whatever reason. One thing I want to mention to you is that it is important that everybody is on board once this whole scheme, so strategic, tactical, and operational planning, has been melded together. Contingency planning, of course, is just in case. We can't have people out of sync, and this is this planning operation. So if you want to say, okay, well, I really think that we need to get our leaders to get this stuff across, that's all well and good, and I certainly agree with that. But if there's not a plan, it's going to be hard for the leader to articulate that. All right. And I'm not going to talk more about this. We talked about this, but I will mention the contingency plan. I'd just like you to see what's here. This is just the preparation of something in case of what if. What if what we decided isn't going to work? And we don't have the resources. We don't have whatever it is we don't have to be able to move forward. The next item we want to talk about is decision making. Decision making is simply, by the way, this is not the process. This is simply deciding between two or more alternatives. It says choosing, you're not making. I like things. I apologize that some of these slides are really not the way I would put them together. I kind of have to follow what I'm given. And this is talked about decision-making skills of top CEOs. I would rather go through the decision-making model first before we talk about this. But this kind of melds itself, it kind of lends itself to the next slide. So I'm putting it up here for you to look at, to kind of digest in a way before we get to the rational decision-making model. Now, I emphasize the term rational because every problem is not solved by going through this particular list. This says I am taking this in a rational manner. This is a logical process that I'm going to go through to solve the problem that I have. This is not always followed. I want to be very clear about that. I don't have an alternative in this course to give you, and I'm not going to do that because, although I do have some, I'm not going to give it to you because I don't want to muddle what we have in the text. I don't think that's appropriate. But some, as you know, some decisions are made based on hunches. Some decisions are made based upon things we've done in the past, which may not follow this model. But this is a good model to use. It starts off by saying, what's the problem? We have to know what the problem is. And by the way, we have to know what the problem was, as define a situation. We have to know what the problem is and not the underlying symptoms. Now, I'll do this quickly. Let's suppose you're a car dealer and the general manager comes to you and says, our sales are down. So you convene a meeting of your hierarchy, if you will, and you say, okay, our sales are down. Why? And somebody says, we're in a poor location. And somebody else says, we have a poor product. And somebody else says, our service is poor. And somebody else says, our pricing is out of whack. Now, each and every one of those could be the reason why sales are down, but each and every one could be a symptom. It could be a symptom of something else. So if you don't define the problem, it's the situation. If you don't define the problem accurately and you only attack symptoms, you're not going to get the answer that you want. You're not going to be able to find the thing. You're not going to, the situation, the problem, and come up with alternatives to fix it. So, okay, so you come up with the alternatives. You decide which alternative is best. In other words, what's going to give you the greatest payback for what you're attempting to do. Do what you say you're going to do. We're going to implement this particular solution, alternative, if you will, and then go back and evaluate what you did and make sure that it was a good one, and you continue to do the things that are necessary to do that, to fix the problem. A little more here on problem solving. Sometimes we have what are known as less formal decisions. Those are decisions that we've already made. And when those decisions come in, we can turn that over to a computer program because we've made that decision before, and we're going to continue to make that decision because circumstances have not changed. And so that we can consider that in a way an informal decision. We don't need that. Then there are some problem solving techniques here. One is in brainstorming, and another one is called PMI. Now, I just want to digress here for a second and talk about brainstorming. when you are brainstorming and you're in a brainstorming session, every idea that is presented is put up somewhere. Now, years ago, we used to use flip charts, and somebody would get up there and be a secretary and write those down. Today, a lot of times you see those done by computer, and so people are sitting in front of a computer terminal and they punch in whatever they want, and so on and so forth. Every idea is listed. During a brainstorming session, there is no evaluation. It's very important that we understand that. There is no evaluation during a brainstorming session. Once the brainstorming session is ended, then we can evaluate what we put up there. But in brainstorming, we do not ever evaluate ideas. Everything is up for being placed there. These are the levels of management. Nothing really surprising here: top, middle, supervisory, and then of course the rank and file employee. This is a listing of people you'll find in top management: CEO, chief COO, chief operating officer, CFO, chief financial officer, etc. This is what I like to call a gee whiz slide. This lists the top female, and it talks to these people as managers. I prefer to refer to them as CEOs, and perhaps more important than managers, they're actually leaders. Now, these are the types of skills that all managers need. Notice that depending upon where you are in the hierarchy, you need more or less of a particular type of skill. So we see on the bottom rung that the first line supervisor needs a lot of technical skills. Then he or she needs human relations skills, and then finally conceptual skills. You'll notice that the middle manager needs about an equal amount of each of those three. Whereas a top manager, CEOs, etc., they need fewer technical skills and they need more human relations skills. They need a great deal of conceptual skills, but I would submit to you they probably need as many human relations skills as they need conceptual skills. That's just my take on it. That doesn't mean I'm right or not. Human relations skills, the biggest thing you can do when you're asking people to do something for you is to thank them when they've completed the task. And it's very important that that thank you is seen as being sincere. And you know, I say that to myself because I thank a lot of people for doing various and sundry things for me to help me do what I'm doing, etc. And I want to make sure that every time I say that the people understand that it's genuine and I really mean that, even though it might sound like, oh, I'm saying thank you to be saying thank you. And so I have to watch myself and make sure that I do that as I should. And I think all of us can learn from that. Business leaders, it says top managers, they need to know things about what's going on globally. They need to understand legal and regulatory environments. Now, of course, they're going to have smart people working for them, especially in the legal and regulatory areas. They're going to help them understand. One of the key things is that the leader has to make sure that he understands what he or she's being told. This is what got us in this financial crisis that started in late 2007, 2008. People would come in and say, oh, now we can do these collateralized loans and a few other type things. And it went on and went on and went on and went on. And the guy or gal who was going to make the decision didn't understand, but not wanting to look like he or she didn't understand, they went along. I think the best statement I heard about this came from Warren Buffett, and he paraphrased an old adage that we've heard for many years. He said, "Beware of geeks bearing formulas," and so that's what happened. And people didn't understand them. And I would tell you, if some of that was told to me, I probably wouldn't understand either. I hope that I would have had enough moxie to say, you're going to have to explain this to me because I don't understand what you're telling me. Too often we don't do that. We don't want to look stupid, and we need to change that. I'm going to pass this. Well, I'm not going to pass it. The staffing. This is just. We're going to talk more about this when we get to the chapter on human resource management. But what this really boils down to, and it's a precursor, is that staffing talks about getting the right people in the right places. It's recruiting and hiring and training, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the last thing is very important. People have to be treated, I'm going to try and change the word here, treated with dignity. If you can't do that, then you probably either you need to go or the employee needs to go. Leadership is a little different than management. Leadership is about creating a vision. Besides what's on here, it's about creating a vision. It's about getting people to buy into your vision, quote unquote, message, and to follow it. Management, on the other hand, is about stability. It's about making sure that the standards and the rules are followed. Does that mean that one, a leader is better than two, a manager? No, not as far as I'm concerned. At a different course that I teach, the author of the text I use says that a company can get along for a period of time. I don't think he defined period of time without a leader, but they can't get along without managers because they're the ones that enforce things that need to be done. Too often today we tend to denigrate managers and lionize leaders when we really shouldn't be doing that. This is something that we're talking here about, an ethical thing, and we're not going to get into that. Now, here are the three leadership styles that are presented in the text. When you take other courses in this curriculum, you'll find other leadership styles, contingency, and a few others. But really, they're different approaches to what we have here: autocratic, participative, and free rein. Free rein is also, in some cases, known as laissez-faire. Autocratic, the guy or gal on top makes all the decisions and doesn't ask for any input. Participative, also known as democratic, the manager and the employees work together to make decisions. And then laissez-faire, or free rein, the manager sets the objectives, ensures that the employees have the necessary resources, and then lets them make whatever decisions they need to make to accomplish the stated goals and objectives. Four types of leaders. The slide actually says natural born leaders. That's not something that I really believe in, although I think some people have a greater propensity to lead than others. We have rationalists, humanists, culturists, and politicists, and we're not going to get into those to any great extent. One of the things that we've talked about, alluded to several times in the course previously, and we'll talk more when we get into the human resource management area, is employee empowerment. This simply is the manager leader giving the employee the tools that he or she needs to do to make decisions. And it talks about it in the text here quite frequently. It lets the frontline employee who is dealing with customers on a regular basis make the decisions without saying, I have to check with my supervisor. And I'm not going to talk a whole lot more about this because I am going to discuss it when we get to that chapter in human resource management. But really what this boils down to is giving the employee the tools that he or she needs to do to make the decisions and then getting out of their way. Obviously giving constructive feedback when that's necessary, but not standing over their shoulder. This is a very forward-looking concept here, and I want to relate that to you. And I want to relate the first one because I think the first one is most important. And I'm having a little trouble getting the picture up here for some reason. And we can't for some reason get away from this. And that is the first bullet that's up there: manage output instead of hours. You know, we ought to stop and think, if an employee can come to work and can accomplish what he or she needs to do for a particular day in 6 hours instead of 8, and let's leave break time and lunchtime out of that, why keep him or her around for an additional 2 hours? Let them go home. Now, what happens here is that breaks the concept of having salaried employees and wage employees. Salaried employee is a person that gets paid X number of dollars regardless of the number of hours he or she works. And normally that speaks to the fact that he or she's going to work the normal hours that he or she's supposed to work, or everybody expects them to work. But if they work additional hours, they're not going to get paid any more money. Whereas the wage earner, if he or she works 40 hours in a work week and then works more than that, they're entitled to time and a half. The law says you have to pay them that. So that's a concept that we have to somehow grasp, because we find that employees are only productive for a certain number of hours a day. After that, their production starts to wane. That's why we went to an 8-hour day. And probably the production that you get out of an employee is somewhere around 6 to 7 hours and not 8. And I'm excluding break times and a few other things there. That's not meant to say anything about anybody. They're not good workers. It's what happens to human beings. You take time out to do this or do that or do something else, which is not productive. Nobody's digging you for it, but there are things that you do. So this is telling us how to work smarter and to take the pressure off employees, but also take the pressure off yourself. This is a key area, knowledge management. We find knowledge management coming into play more and more today than we have in the past. And the key here is this first bullet. And I'm going to say it. I pause. I'm still having some trouble here with my video. There we go. The key here is making sure that you keep what you need to keep and discard the rest of it. We get an awful lot of stuff every day, email and Instagrams and all the rest of that stuff that may not be important. Some pieces of it may be important. We need to figure out what that is, and that's what we need to keep. And then make sure that when we keep that the people that need to know it know where it is and they can access it easily. This just talks about using your social media. We've talked a little bit about that, and I'm not going to talk about social media any longer. And this is the 5 steps in the control process, which, as you remember, is the last of the 4 functions of management. And what we're doing here is we're saying that the control process consists of having set clear standards. Then we're going to, and I'm going to talk about this like on an assembly line. We're sending product through, maybe we're going to send it through an oven to be finally fixed together. And we're going to monitor the performance all the way through this assembly line. And we're going to make a record of it. And then we're going to, once we get to, now I'm going to come back here a second. Once we get the finished product, then we're going to compare what the finished product is with what our expectations are, what our standards are. However, and this is where I'm coming back, we're going to monitor this through the whole process, not just the end of the process. Because if we only monitor the end of the process and we find out something doesn't meet specification and we throw it out, all we've done is produced a bunch of scrap. So we want to make sure we're doing this through the entire process and making corrections where they need to be made. If we find out that what we've produced along the way meets specifications or is within tolerance, and our specifications are going to have a ceiling and a floor, and assuming that it's right, it's going to be there where it's supposed to be, somewhere in the middle, or we hope it's going to be in the middle, then we got a good product, we're going to ship it. But we're going to let everybody know what we found. Here's how we went through the process. If we find that there's areas in the process that need to be fixed, we're going to correct them. Hopefully we can correct them before we produce a final product that amounts to scrap. So corrective action. And then the last step, which is not one of the 5 steps, but is certainly a very important step, that is, we're going to ask the question, are our standards realistic? That's part of the feedback process. And if we are, then we're in good shape. And how we measure success, we measure success 2 ways. We measure success from feedback that we get from internal customers, and we measure feedback that we get from external customers. Hopefully each of these folks will tell us what it is we need to do to correct ourselves. We are at 5:10. We have finished chapter 7. We're going to take a 3-minute break, and we'll come back and discuss chapter 8. Please come back at 5:13. Thank you. Mr. Belgeri, you still on the line?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Did you saw the chat message I just sent?
Well, I see the chat message, but I don't see anything on here. Okay. Are you going to leave in a few minutes?
Well, if you're going to start up now, I'll hang out till about 5:20 your time.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
I'll let you know when I step away.
Okay, I thank you for attending. If you have any questions, send me a note. I apologize. I just saw that. You can always send me an email because I'd answer it that way as well.
That sounds like it works. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Okay, 513, Chapter 8, Structuring Organizations for Today's Challenges. Pardon me. Our learning objectives are look at the basic principles of organization management, compare the organization theories of Henri Fayol and Max Weber, by the way, W-E-B-E-R, but it is pronounced Weber. Evaluate the choices managers make in structuring organizations. Contrast the various organization models. Identify the benefits of inter-firm cooperation and coordination. And finally, explain how organizational culture can help businesses adapt to change. We start out by saying at this slide that reorganization is for everyone. And we found that many companies, especially the first one up there, automobile manufacturers, are changing the way that they manufacture using a lot more robotics and things of that nature. The fact is that by doing that, we have fewer employees, but by the same token, those employees tend to be more productive than they have been in the past. So we know that we have to structure organizations in certain ways so that the processes that we use to manufacture something or even to provide a service are both effective and efficient. One of the things we want to do, and this will come from some of the things we talk about Fayol and Weber, is to create a division of labor. And then, of course, today we're seeing more teams. We need to make sure that we are adequately allocating resources. Now, when I say that, there's always competition for resources, and that's a continual thing. Resources are not infinite; they're finite, and then we need to make sure that we're allocating them properly, and not just to the person or persons that holler loudest or make what we think are the most compelling arguments. And then talks about we have to have procedures. They have to be established. They probably have to be, I don't like to use the word, but I must because I think we need to say that. They need to be codified, simply meaning they need to be written someplace and then adjust as necessary. Today's organization is changing, and one of the reasons it's changing is because we have more global competition. Now, I would disagree with the second bullet, declining economy. I don't think our economy is declining, but now if you look at the difference between the growth in our economy, which is traditionally, if our economy is doing well, is usually somewhere between 2.5 and 4%. China just announced that today, well, maybe yesterday, depending upon the time difference, that their economy grew the slowest in its last 25 years, and that was at 6.8 or 6.9%. I'm not sure which one I heard this morning. I heard both of those figures, and there was some discrepancy. I didn't quite get that. Technology is changing, and in many cases, it's difficult for companies to keep up. And lastly, we need to protect the environment. And we can protect the environment, and we can produce what we need to produce, and the two aims should not be competing with each other. There are ways to do that. Unfortunately, we don't always stop and think about that. And so what happens is one becomes competition with the other. The problem with that is there's only one environment. We're not going to get another. And if we think we're going to get another one, we're being foolish. Now, I suppose there might be somebody in several hundred years that could come up with an artificial environment, but that's different than what we have. And we don't want to destroy what we have, and I'm not even sure that would work. And then finally, the last part on this slide is that customers' expectations have changed. And therefore, we need to meet the expectations. And customers want things that they want, and they don't want to settle for anything less than what is promised. This just shows you the changes that we've made, pardon me, in a decade. And only one I want to point out is the daily emails. We've gone from 12 billion, I don't know who counts those, by the way, in 2000 to almost 250 billion 10 years later. We also find out that we have a mass production of goods. We have to have, because of that, we have to have economies of scale. So we can get the production in sync with the purchasing that we need, and purchasing in bulk as opposed to as it were. Now, that's going to kind of contradict when we talk about just-in-time inventory. But there's a difference. So don't think that these are mutually exclusive terms. They're not. You can still purchase in bulk and use just-in-time inventory. So we need to think about that. Henri Fayol is a Frenchman. His work was done in the middle part, I think, of the 19th century, and didn't really come to the United States until the 1940s or so. And he had 14 particular principles. I don't really want to go over all of them. I only want to talk about a couple. One is unity of command. You can't have people at cross purposes in command. There must be a hierarchy of authority. Now, whether you have a, I look forward to seeing you next week, Mr. Belgeri. Excuse me, I didn't mean to mispronounce your name. It doesn't, whether we're talking about a flat organization or a hierarchical organization, a stovepipe organization, we still have to have a hierarchy of authority. You don't have to have as many layers of authority, but you still need to have them. Clear communication. That is just a must. And there's some other ones in here, but equity. People need to think, employees we're talking about here, they need to understand and to see and to perceive that they're being treated fairly, which is equitably. When they don't think they are, then all kinds of problems can occur, and none of them are nice occurrences. This is just continue with Fayol. One supervisor, one boss, one manager, whatever you want to say. And it's clear what the lines of authority are. And then notice he talks about rigid organizations, that if they're too rigid, they're not going to respond to customers as quickly as they should. Now, Max Weber also did his work in the 1800s, and it came to the United States in, I think, 1947. At least that sticks in my mind. And it talks about his particular book here. Notice what he talked about. He said that each worker should have a written job description and that workers should know that. By extension, and I will talk a little bit about this when we get to the human resource management chapter, the job description is what the employee should be when he or she is evaluated. That should be used to evaluate. In other words, here's the job description, here are the standards, et cetera, et cetera. We are going to evaluate Johnny or Susie's job performance based upon what we have written. Now, what we may find out is the job performance needs to be, the job description needs to be changed. That's always a possibility. But we don't want to be rating them against something or evaluating them against something that doesn't exist or something that we think ought to exist but doesn't. He talks about there ought to be written rules, that there ought to be consistent procedures, and that promotion should be based on merit. Well, merit, qualifications, the same thing. I wanted you to want to make sure that you see that. Now, one of the things that Weber really espoused is what we know as a bureaucracy. Now, Weber did not look at bureaucracies as we tend to look at bureaucracies today and say that bureaucracies are all bad. Weber did not believe that. And he certainly believed that when you got to a bureaucracy, you were actually creating something that was based upon rules, and that rules needed to be followed. What happens in many bureaucracies is there are rules, and the people will say, I can't break the rules. And that's not necessarily the case. There tend to be guidelines. They tell you what you can't do. They don't tell you what you can do. And so we need to look at that and help people beyond that. Both of these folks talk about hierarchy, both talk about chain of command, and those are things that haven't changed. We have things known as organizational charts. In the military, I've spent a good deal of time in the Army, we refer to these as wiring diagrams. Regardless of what we call them, this just outlines reporting relationships. And that's all it shows, and no more and no less. Well, it does give some of the other ones. It does show the work and how the work is done, etc. And then it also has reporting relationships. I apologize if I forget about it. This particular slide, and I apologize, I scrolled too far here. Typical organization chart, and this just gives you an idea of who reports to whom and how things are set up. Now, here's the bureaucracy. I don't want to talk a whole lot about this. It's necessary to talk. Bureaucracies do have a number of layers of management. And because people tend to pay more attention to the layers of management than they do in many cases about doing things that need to be done, or accomplishing things that need to be done, they're too wrapped up in rules and procedures and following them. And as I said, in many cases, what they say to you is, this is what you cannot do. It doesn't tell you what you can do. And this is where we get into trouble. And the last statement is very true. Bureaucracies can annoy people. One of the largest bureaucracies, at least before their last reorganization in the United States, was not the federal government, was not a state government. it was General Motors. And General Motors is well known for bureaucracy, and that may be what got them in trouble with the ignition issue that they're still grappling with today, that what surfaced in the early 2000s. So bureaucracy can be a detriment, but it doesn't have to be, because there's some things about a bureaucracy that are good. Promoting people based upon merit and qualifications, having rules and procedures, having job descriptions. Those are all good things. But it's when we get tied into this quote unquote red tape that we have issues. Okay, so the question is, we talked about we're going to make things better and so on and so forth. We want to have centralized authority or decentralized authority. Both have their pluses and minuses. Centralized starts from the top and comes down. Decentralized authority is a flat organization. We have probably a little bit more of that today, and a lot of that's due to the medium I'm using right here, the computer, because we can talk to people almost instantaneously. Now, of course, that extends to social media, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and sending text messages and things of that nature. So let's continue with this discussion about centralized and decentralized. I think we can see this. This is, by the way, in your text. That's figure 8.2 at the bottom of page 218. I'm not going to go over all of these, but in a centralized, it tends to be more efficient, and you have greater control by the folks in charge. The downside is it can be less responsive. I want to use the term less responsive, not to non-responsive. That's what the slide says, and I want to make sure we get that. Employees are not empowered as much to act because you've got this stovepipe hierarchical centralized authority, and it could lower morale. On the decentralized side, we can interact with customers better. Our employees, frontline employees, tend to have more empowerment, which tends to lead to higher morale. These things can be less efficient. There's less top management control, and I'm not sure about weakened corporate image. I can see that's a possibility, but not necessarily all the way through. Span of control simply talks about the right number, uses the term optimal, the right number of employees for a supervisor or a manager to have reporting to him or her. Notice when it says when the work is standardized, we can have broad spans of control. When we move up the corporate ladder, we tend to get narrower spans of control. In other words, the CEO of an organization probably has a few direct reports: a chief operating officer, chief financial officer, chief information officer, and there could be one or two others. Whereas a first line supervisor may have 10 or 12. And notice what we have here. The trend today is to have fewer middle managers and have more knowledgeable and trained lower level employees. And one of the reasons we have fewer middle managers today is because of the ability to communicate much more quickly, emails and the rest. And if we talk about centralized authority and decentralized authority, it follows with these two organizational structures. A tall structure will have most likely centralized authority, and going to have various levels of management, and most decisions are made upstairs and come down. Decentralized or flat organization structure, fewer layers of management that we just more or less talked about in the last few seconds. This gives you flat organization structure. This shows an owner-manager of a small business and then the direct reports that he or she has. These are pluses and minuses, advantages and disadvantages of narrow and broad. This is also seen in your text at figure 8.4 at the top of page 220. We know what narrow is. It's going to give more control to the folks in charge upstairs. We might find greater closer supervision and greater specialization. On the downside, on the narrow downside, we'd have more responsiveness to customers. I think I mispronounced that word about 3 times. We're going to respond to customers quicker. Faster decision making and more empowerment. Actually, what that should say is less empowerment. On the broad side, I think this slide's not right. Because on the broad side, we're going to have more empowerment. We have to have. We could have higher costs, but that necessarily is right. Delayed decision making because it's broad and we don't have a stovepipe up to the leadership. But we're going to be more responsive to customers. This slide's incorrect. Fewer chances for advancement. Yeah, I guess if we're talking about moving into management because there's going to be fewer management positions. Loss of control is a potential, and then less management expertise is also a potential. These are the ways we can organize departmentalization. We separate into units, separate units, and workers tend to be grouped by skills or expertise based upon their education and experience. By the way, we're going to see this there's a slide for that, and we'll see that shortly, and that's figure 8.5 in your text at the top of page 221. Departments may not communicate well because there is a thought process of them against us. It's also true that because departments tend to, in some cases, be insular, the employee will identify with the department as opposed to identifying with the organization. Again, the insularity may cause us to be slow to adapt to changing environment. Because there is a focus on skills and expertise in certain areas, there's not the ability to expand and have people be able to be managers in other locations because of the narrowness of the expertise and skills. And last, because, as I mentioned before, it's kind of a them versus us mentality, the people in departments may engage in groupthink. And groupthink simply says, we're better than anybody else, and we're not going to do things just because people want us to do them. These are ways to break up in departments. You could do this by product. You could do it by function. We have another slide here. We show it by customer group, by geography, and by process. Now, there are other ways we can do this. We can do it by line organizations, line and staff, matrix style organizations, and cross-functional. Line personnel, excuse me, let's do line organization first before we get to line personnel. Line organization, notice the first thing there, that two-way communication. Have responsibility for everything from top to bottom. And everybody's going to report to one person. There's no specialists. These people are in, if you will, production mode, whether they're making widgets or they're providing a service. And the line manager is in charge, and everybody pays attention to what he or she has to say, follows the rules. These people are directly responsible for producing whatever it is the company produces, whether it's a product or a service. And notice they also include other people who are considered line workers, product distribution and marketing employees. And they can make policy decisions. Staff personnel are there to help the line personnel, to provide expertise. Notice they talk about here the legal, human resource management, information technology, et cetera, et cetera. They're there to provide expertise in their field to the line personnel, but they are not there to tell the line personnel what to do. And this is what causes a conflict. And it causes conflict because the experts, staff personnel, they know what should be done, and the line personnel are going to do it their own way. And so the staff personnel say, well, look, you asked us to come down and tell you what to do. We're telling you what to do, and you're not paying any attention to us. Now, it doesn't happen all the time, but it can happen, and that causes friction. But to go back to what I just said, staff personnel are there to provide advice and expertise, but they're not there to tell the line personnel what to do. And this is a slide that gives you line and staff personnel. Notice the human resource management, legal department, and marketing and research department. They're going to give some input to the plant manager, but notice they're not telling anybody what to do. There is no direct line. A matrix organization is a different type of animal because you're bringing expertise in from various parts of the organization to work together on a temporary basis on special projects, but they're still going to be part of where they came from, line or staff people. Notice what the emphasis is on: product development, creativity, special projects, etc. This is a sample matrix organization. I'm not going to go through this. It is kind of, in a way, a little busy. You can see it at figure 8.7 at the top of page 225. We have these things, and they have some advantages. There is flexibility. Managers can decide who they want to assign. There is cooperation, or hopefully there's cooperation, because you're bringing different elements of the organization together, and they wouldn't necessarily always meet together. You can get creative solutions, hopefully, because you have more people giving input, coming from different aspects of the company, and look at problems and solutions differently. So you get a good melding of your resources together. And what it says down here at the bottom, you have efficient use of the resources. The biggest downside is the first one. It is costly and it is complex because the employee or employees really still report to their old workplace, that can be confused over where their loyalties lie. What the third bullet says is you simply can't put somebody on a matrix project or who's not a good communicator. It's important that these people be able to talk to each other. Notice that these people are temporary, and the solution they may come up with is temporary, but the problem is long term. And temporary is like years ago before we had the type of tires that we have today, a tire went flat. You found a hole in the tire on the inner tube, which we don't have today, and you put a patch on it to keep it, and then pumped it back up. Put the inner tube back in, pumped it back up, and you went on your business. Kept you from buying new tires all the time, but it didn't serve. It may not solve a long-term problem if the patch was not put on properly, seat there, et cetera, et cetera. And the last thing is, and everybody knows this, the teams know this, they're not permanent. And so that could cause somebody to say, well, you know what I like here? I'm not going to be back here tomorrow or next month or 6 weeks from now, or whatever it happens to be. Now, that sounds like a downer, and I don't mean it to be a downer, and I don't mean it to be negative. But sometimes it's human nature to say, I don't have a lot of buy-in here. So why should I be concerned over a long-term issue when I'm going to be gone tomorrow? I'm going to go back to my old job. Not a good attitude to have, but we know that does happen. Cross-functional self-managed teams are a little bit different than the matrix teams because they're groups of employees that come from different departments. But notice that they're going to work on this on a long-term basis, and they're self-managed. In other words, they have control over their destiny. So the matrix teams are short-lived, whatever short means, but probably something less than a year. So you want to have these self-managed teams. And we're down here to this last bullet. The self-managed teams have to have the empowerment to be truly self-managed. They deal with suppliers, with customers, and the other folks to figure out what it is that they need to do. And there's a problem here with self-managed teams because it's not with the teams themselves. It's often with management because they're not sure what to do. Management's been in charge and telling them what to do. So here where you have a person who may be management and he or she may be considered the quote unquote team leader, he or she has to make up his or her mind as to whether or not they're going to be the team leader or going to be a facilitator. Now, the reason I say that is because he or she's going to have to give up this management thing if they want to stay with a self-management team. Management being someplace else interacting with a hierarchy. So, you can't be, you have to be fish or fowl. You can't be you can't be both. You just have to figure out what it is you're going to do. Now, this next slide comes along and it really complements cross-functional teams. Let me talk about it before I get to that next slide I wanted to get to. Cross-functional teams are only good if they're paid attention to. And notice that these teams should include other people, outsiders. That's not always possible, but to the best of your ability, to the extent that you can do that, yes, do that. Notice you can use the government for finding additional resources. Now, this particular slide is very important because this talks to not only small teams, but to any teams. Teams probably shouldn't be too large because if they are, they become unwieldy. 10's a good number. 10's a good number because it's easy to multiply, subtract, add, and divide to 10. There's nothing on this slide that is, gee whiz, I could never have thought of that. Obviously, the team has to have direction. It has to know what its goals are. They have to have complementary skills. Everybody is accountable. If you want a team to work, everybody is accountable. It's not just one person, it's everybody on the team. And not only do they have to have complementary skills, they have to be able to take on other roles when that's necessary, when it becomes necessary, because someone's out sick or somebody left to go someplace else or whatever it happens to be. So there have to be not only complementary skills, they have to have the ability to shift as necessary. Real-time business is what this talks about. It talks about networking, using technology to link organizations together. That sort of thing. Real-time is exactly what it means. I'm not going to try to explain that any differently than what it says. Real-time is real-time, and we can't talk about it any other way. Transparency is obviously necessary. This is where companies are open and they let their information be shared. And a virtual corporation, we're going to talk about that in a second, is a networked organization made up of replaceable firms that join and leave as needed. This is a particular slide here, which you can see this at the bottom of page 227, figure 8.8. This shows the core firm here in the middle and these ancillary firms on the outside. Everybody is learning from each other. This is talking about cutting costs. Hiring workers is a very expensive proposition for any business, doubly so for a small business. What's led to some offshoring, et cetera, although that's not necessarily the case across the board. Benchmarking, very important thing that companies do. Benchmarking is simply comparing your practices against those of a leader in your industry. Core competencies are what you do best. Things that you don't do best are not core competencies, and they should be farmed out to somebody else, like IT functions or human resource management functions, something that can be done. Now, outsourcing there does not always mean going outside the United States. Healthcare outsourcing, I don't want to talk too much about this. There may be some cost savings, but on the downside, we just don't know what's going to happen, and we find lower employee morale, et cetera. The market has changed, or the markets have changed. This is a picture of a typewriter. I would submit to you that there are many people in the United States and around the world that don't even know what a typewriter looks like, because they haven't had typewriters in their lifetime. I came back retired from the Army, and even though I did have a computer, I still had a typewriter because I was used to typing forms and stuff on it. Well, the typewriter decided it didn't want to work. I took it to the only repair place in the greater Cincinnati area. I had to give them a deposit, and they called me several hours later and said, it's not fixable. We had a typewriter here that was on a shelf around the corner from my office, an IBM Selectric that stayed there for several years. Nobody took it. What this just means is let's get rid of stuff we don't need and go on with something else. Young people know the internet, let them use it. Get out of their way. We have to be careful about communication. We need to make sure that what we're communicating can be communicated, and that we're not exposing people to things that they don't want to be exposed to. Restructuring, we know what that is. That's just changing the way we do things so we can be more efficient. Inverted organization, I'm going to talk about that too much. This means the CEO is on the bottom of the organizational chart. I guess that occurs in some places, but here's the graphic picture of it. And you can see that figure 8.8 at the top of page 231. Organization and corporate culture, very important. This talks about our values, and it is used to have people cooperate with each other and form a sense of unity. Culture is shown in stories, traditions, and myths. We know what a formal organization is, and we've talked about this before, and we say that in some cases it tends to be bureaucratic, but it does define the lines of authority, and we do need to have some formalization, otherwise we're going to have problems. Informal organization talks about a system of relationships, and the informal organization, sometimes known as a grapevine, can often help things get along, but we have to remember the informal organization, powerful as it may be, has no authority to act. And we have to make sure that we separate the difference between the two before we find ourselves in trouble. Notice it's unstructured and emotional, and it could work against management. These are examples of some informal group norms. Don't tell off-color jokes or use profanity, which is a good one. And drinking is done off the job, never at work. Those things are fine as well. Okay, that brings us to the end of chapter 8. We will take a 3-minute break, come back at 5:58, and we will talk about production and operations management. Please come back 3:58, or excuse me, 5:58. Thank you. All right. Production and Operations Management, Chapter 9. Learning objectives are to describe the current state of U.S. manufacturing or what manufacturers have done to become more competitive. Describe the evolution from production to operations management. Identify various production processes and describe techniques that improve productivity, including computer-aided design and manufacturing, flexible manufacturing, lean manufacturing, and mass customization. Describe operations management planning issues, including facility location, facility layout, materials requirement planning, purchasing, just-in-time inventory control, and quality control. And finally, we're going to talk about the uses of PERT and Gantt charts to control manufacturing processes. Manufacturing in the United States, although not talked about as much in this edition of the text as it was in the previous edition of the text, is still pretty healthy. Yeah, we're not manufacturing like we did when we had no competition. That's true. But I just heard today that China is moving from a manufacturing economy to a service economy. So it must mean that cheap stuff we get from China, by the way, I use that term cheap to differentiate between inexpensive and cheap, is going someplace else. Maybe it's going to Vietnam. It's not going to go to Taiwan, that's for sure. It might go some other places. So yeah, we still are having some economic growth in manufacturing. Yes, there are fewer workers in manufacturing today than there used to be because of the production. Now we do have some issues. We've taken a real serious hit with steel and cement manufacturing because other countries are dumping their product in the United States, meaning they're bringing product over here to sell for less than it costs them to manufacture it. But U.S. manufacturers are still doing well, and yes, some are not doing as well as they used to. But manufacturing is not as bad as people want to think of it. It has been growing in the United States since the 1970s. These are things that we manufacture. I'm not going to talk about that, but the stuff that we still manufacture. We don't think about those because they're not automobiles, or they're not TV sets, or they're not PCs. Still manufactured. Some of it maybe we shouldn't manufacture, but we do. Top 10 manufacturing companies in the United States. Look at Hershey. Hershey's a manufacturer. Manufactures candy. We just don't think about that as being manufactured. We want to think about things like Apple, etc. Matter of fact, most of the things that Apple produces are made outside the United States. This is just top paying service jobs in the United States. I'm not going to discuss that. It's something that's interesting, but not something that we have to try to commit to memory. We're still the leaders in nanotechnology and biotechnology. And we're going to get customers back by focusing on them. We need to keep good relationships with suppliers. Now, let me give you an example of suppliers and what Toyota does with them. When Toyota wants to make a change in design or whatever, they call their suppliers in and tell them what they want to do and then ask them if that's feasible. So they're treating the supplier not just as a supplier, but as an external customer. Can you deliver what we want you to deliver? And if you can, then we're going to have this good partner, continue this partnership. Focus on quality. Locate close to your customers. You're going to find this out from the ball video. I'm not trying to, jump on the ball for you, but until you don't look at it. But there's some things in the ball that really talks about what we're going to talk about here tonight, and really emphasizes some of the concepts that the text is bringing out here through the video. This talks about Germany and what Germany does. Germany is a country that has about a fourth of the population of the United States, and is one of the top exporting countries in the world. Now, we're also a large exporting country, but we're also a large importing country. We're in the top three of exports. People don't think that. We tend to compare and continually compare the United States productivity and things that it does against China. Our population is about 350 million. China's population is over 1 billion. That's a hard comparison. And I'm not here to say that we should give up where we are. I'm just telling you that we have more competition today than we ever had in the past. And it causes us to work harder. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, production and production management. And production management is creating goods for the most part. Yes, goods as opposed to services. Using the factors of production that we talked about. And production management is everything a manager does to help the firm produce the goods it wants to produce. Operations management, on the other hand, is different because it includes a number of things that we didn't talk about before. Now, notice here that we say that operations management is a specialized area that transforms raw material into finished product. Doesn't say it exactly that way on the slide, but that's what it says. Well, production management kind of did that in a way, but a little bit differently. But look at what operations management includes that is not included in production management. Inventory management and control, quality control. I like to use the term quality assurance because of the way we used to use the term quality control in the United States was not quality control. That's where we got to the end of the production line and found something didn't meet specifications and we threw it in a scrap bin. We also do production scheduling and then follow-up. None of that is included in production management. We also, operations management also extends to the service sector. Talks about the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. When I used to teach human resource management, which I no longer teach, I used to use the Ritz-Carlton as one of the case studies that was assigned in the text. And it talked about the training that employees went through and that they were continually being trained and what they're trying to do to meet customers' expectations and not only meet them, but to exceed them. Here's the production process, which we talked about before. There's the 5 factors of production on the left-hand side. And then the production control, planning, routing, scheduling, etc. And then we get outputs, goods, services, ideas. Farm utility is the value that the production people add to materials in the creation of finished goods and services. These next bullets, if you will, or words of wisdom, maybe is a better way, come from Andrew Grove. Andrew Grove, for a long time, was the chief executive officer of Intel. And look what he talks about these production requirements. Produce the products that customers ask for when they want them. Make sure that we're giving an acceptable level of quality. Now, acceptable means acceptable to the customer. And to do these things at the lowest possible price. We have process and assembly in production. Process is where we're actually physically changing the property of what we have, the raw material, into something else. And assembly simply means we're putting things together. It's pretty simple to figure that one out. Now we're going to talk about key production processes. Continuous process, that means we have a long run over an extended period of time that are going to put out the finished goods that we're looking for. Intermittent processes are just the reverse. They're short runs that allow the manufacturer to produce a number of different goods. That's just a gee whiz slide we're going to pass. Now, what is it that can make us more competitive? Well, we talk about four things here: computer-aided design and computer-aided manufacturing, lumping those into one. Flexible manufacturing, lean manufacturing, and then mass customization. So let's look at these individually. Computer-aided design, CAD, is exactly what it says. It's using a computer to help us design the products that we want to produce. Whereas computer-aided manufacturing is actually using the computer in the manufacturing process. Computer integrated manufacturing is what it says. It's uniting those two things we talked about, computer-aided design and computer-aided manufacturing, together. Notice that it is expensive to do, but that it cuts as much as 80% of the production time. So in the long run, it should be less expensive and more efficient. Flexible manufacturing, notice what this is. This is taking a machine and designing the machine to be able to do multiple types of manufacturing, produce a variety of products. Allen Bradley, which is a company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I believe, uses it to build motor starters. The object of lean manufacturing is to use less of everything. Now, I attended a business research conference last year where one of the presenters complained about lean manufacturing because he said that even though it means we're supposed to be using less, that has not stopped us from continuing to use. So his point was that while we're doing lean manufacturing and while it's doing what it's supposed to do, it's allowing us to make more things, and so it's not necessarily environmentally friendly. But we have to think about that. We have to take that a little bit with a grain of salt because lean manufacturing, if it's designed to do what it's designed to do, means that we're going to use less raw material to make what it is we want to make. And so if we're doing that and we're simply producing what we used to produce, then it is environmentally friendly. If, however, we're getting all these efficiencies and we're actually producing more than what we used to produce, obviously trying to sell more, then it's not necessarily as environmentally friendly as it looks like it is. Now, there's a balance here that has to be struck, and companies need to look at that. So I'm not going to go through everything that I've mentioned that's on this slide. It's just using less material than what you're supposed to do, than what was normally used. And notice the one that I don't particularly care for is have half the defects in finished products. Why would you settle for half? Why wouldn't it be much less than that? So I think we need to think about what this says and some of what these things said. I'm not demeaning it, but notice that it's talking about using less, and it's talking about using less across the board. So you get some real good benefit out of it. Mass customization. Here you're using products to meet the needs of a large number of individual customers. So you're going to do a run and you'll say, okay, this is for XYZ Corporation, this is for ABC Corporation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is customization. Robotics. We know that the robotics are around. We're going to see probably more and more of that as we move along. Notice what the use of robotics is. The manufacturing process can continue throughout the day. We don't have to stop because we send people home. Sensors can help us detect issues, and when they can do this quickly, then we can fix them as quickly as possible. Other things about that are important in operations management are looking at facility location and layout, the type of materials you need, purchasing, inventory control, and quality control. You will hear organizations say that things are successful depending upon location, and everything depends upon location, 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 location. This is simply selecting an area to be close to your customers to set up operations and to minimize travel, other types of logistics, bringing supplies in, sending finished product out. Other things we have to worry about are labor costs, etc. Operations management on the internet. I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but this can be done. Relationships can be managed through the internet. We're talking about the design, manufacturing, etc. So it's something that should be looked at. Future facility layout. Also talk here about telecommuting, letting people work from home. Just have to be careful about that. We're going to talk more about that another chapter or two. It's a big issue. It can be a gold mine. It can be a detriment. You should only have the right type of people who work from home. A facility layout is very important, and there's different ways to set that up, and need to look at that. And without talking about that slide, we'll talk about how we set things up. We can have assembly line, We can have modular, fixed layout position, and a process layout position. Assembly line, I do a task, assembly line moves, next person does a task. Workers produce more complex units of the final product. That's a modular. Fixed, people come to the site and do work together in processes over functions. And this is assembly line layout. Just give you graphic examples of these. This is a modular layout. Notice how we have the tools set up here in different places. This is a process layout. And finally, we come to one that I think we all can think of, and we probably don't think of it this way, and that's a fixed position layout. There's a house being built, and different types of contractors can all work at the same time. Materials requirement planning and enterprise resource planning. Enterprise resource planning is a newer version of materials requirement planning. This is, notice, a computer-based management system that uses sales forecasts to make sure parts and materials are there when they need them. Sales forecasts should drive what you buy, because you're saying, I'm going to sell this many product or sell this much product. Purchasing is, again, something we do as part of operations management now. And the purchasing person is looking for quality material at the best possible price. Inventory control, also in some cases part of purchasing. We have several things there. Just-in-time inventory, that's working with your suppliers and saying, we want you to deliver certain material that we need when we need it. Now, that when we need it can be a little bit of a fudge factor there. What I mean by that is saying, I don't need it just today, but I need it, I need it 2 days from today, so I can continue. Many times you're working with 1 or 2 suppliers, and this is a symbiotic relationship. You said, I'm going to buy from you. You have good material. You have what I want, and I'm going to rely on you to do that. This is a Six Sigma process, and this is also inventory control. And they only want X number of defects per million opportunities. Very, 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 very small. Statistical quality control is another process that's used. And then statistical process control. These are using statistics to monitor the quality phases of the entire operation. I'm not going to discuss the Baldrige Awards. ISO stands for International Organization Standardization. If you're an American company, you want to do business in Europe, you need to be either ISO 9000 or ISO 14000 or both certified. Otherwise, you won't get in the door. A PERT chart. And I want to refer you to the last part of the chapter that shows PERT charts and Gantt charts. And you'll find the PERT chart, Program Evaluation and Review Technique, at the bottom of page 260, figure 9.3. Notice here, it's a process that we use, it's called a method, for analyzing the tasks involved in completing a given project and then estimating the time needed to complete the specific task and the product itself. Here are the steps involved in the PERT chart. You have to analyze and sequence the task. Again, estimating the time, which we talked about before. You can draw this network and then identifying the critical path. A critical path says what takes the longest time to complete. So we have to know what that is, so then we can work on it. And a Gantt chart is similar to a PERT chart, except that it is a bar graph, which you can see figure 9.4 on page 261, shows what projects are being worked on and then how much has been completed. And this is the chart for the PERT chart. For the Gantt chart. Okay, that is at 6:23, and that brings us to the end of chapter 9. Now, the lecture discussion question for today is, what is the difference between production management and operations management? Now, you're going to have to use a little critical thinking skills to identify the difference between them. I don't want just the laundry list of showing what is production management and what is operations management. What's the difference between the two? And the differences could, in some cases they're subtle. But what's the difference between the two, and why have we moved? You can extend this. I'm not making this another question. Why have we moved from production management to operations management? That should be part of how you answer the question. So the lecture discussion question for tonight is, what is the difference between production management and operations management? So I thank you for your attention. I'll have this lecture uploaded as quickly as possible. And I thank you for your attention, and good night.